Welcome to Business Talk here on Business Tech, South Africa's #1 business news website with over 3 million unique views every month. And one of the things we experienced in the media was a big surge during the pandemic of people accessing digital channels to get their information. And I think it's trite to now say that the pandemic turbocharged people's and companies' digital transformation journeys. But what struck me just recently was how much further we still have to go. My partner's daughter had to go into hospital for knee surgery, and the amount of paperwork that she had to fill in was frightening. And the forms looked like they had been copied from 1970. And I'm sure the data is then recaptured and used by this rather large hospital group. But it got me thinking about how much more we still need to go. I mean, we talk about digital, but there's still a lot of runway. And my next guest certainly knows all about this, Dave Woolnough, who's a EY Africa advisory partner and is really focused on helping companies understand this digital transformation journey. So Dave, great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Michael, and appreciate the time.
Now, when we talk about digital transformation, I think it means lots of different things to different people, but certainly for the chief information officer, that must be almost the single most important thing that seizes them at the moment. If you look at the top listed companies and their value, it's now all about data, and that is really all about this digital transformation. How do you see the role of the CIO changing?
Michael, that's a fascinating question, and certainly we've done some market research both globally and in South Africa, and we asked a number of CTOs and CIOs around the new changes in the ecosystems and environments and how it's affecting their job. And certainly from the research we saw is that the primary objective that has changed is obviously driving the digital agenda, but also the fact that with this new change in ways of working, they've fast-tracked from bricks and mortar call center environment into a digital space. Now, with that comes some interesting challenges, because from a CIO perspective, traditionally what they've been in the past is more an order taker, so understanding what the business objectives are and really putting in IT strategies that meet that objective over a 3 to 5 year period. And what we saw accelerated through the pandemic was the CIOs are now brought into the table to say, we have to solve for something like remote working and all the facets associated to that, things like security, and the CIO now played a more instrumental and leadership role in those boardroom conversations. Now that's sort of the change in the expectation of the CIO role, but I think also speaking personally to a number of my customers, it's balancing this new demand that's being created, the strategic intent, with actually keeping the lights on and keeping business as usual running as well. So it's a really tough place for a CIO to be right now. Lots of opportunities because a lot of the decisions that were potentially taking a while to get made are now all of a sudden were made. Examples like rolling out Teams, Microsoft Teams happened immediately. So they get some acceleration, but now they've got to keep up with that innovation as well as maintaining the business as usual strategies. So it's a very tough place to be right now.
A tough balancing act. And I was chatting to Paul Morley the other day, who led Nedbank's move into the cloud. And he was at pains to stress to me, he said, Michael, be careful. There's a lot of hype around cloud. If you're going to do it just because you think you're getting a cost advantage, some things are actually more expensive once you're in that ecosystem. Yes, we're getting a lot of value from it because we looked at it from a completely different perspective. We said, how is cloud going to enable generating new value and new insights into the future? So while everyone's talking about going digital, there are a lot of pitfalls. So how do organizations, you spoke about balance, how do they balance the demands of tech, of business transformation, of keeping the lights on, and also just business as usual? What's a good strategy to employ?
Yeah, I think Paul's 100% right. Firstly, and know Paul from my Nedbank days. The key thing here is that you've got to always understand that as part of your core strategy is you've got a business to run. So that's always got to be sort of priority one. And I don't think you can lose focus on that. The second thing is to say, what are the 3 or 4 fundamental shifts that you have to make in your organization and prioritize that? In my experience, focusing on more than 3 or 4 core priorities, you become distracted and you lose focus on what you need to deliver on. And in my experience, whether it is a startup, whether it is a major corporate, if you're too distracted, you don't get efficiency and effectiveness in your delivery. So that would be the second thing. And then be very clear around adopting technology, not for technology's sake, but for the business value that gets unlocked. The example that Paul mentioned about the cloud is exactly that point, is if you're going to do what's termed a lift and shift of your technology from on-premise into cloud, and that's your only reason for doing it, your costs efficiencies won't be there, the effectiveness won't be there. So you've got to understand what cloud brings to you, not just cost, but also the efficiency gains, the improvements in data security, compliance, all those things. And that's what builds your business case around cloud adoption. So to answer the question, it's balancing. You have to keep the lights on. You've got a business to run. You've got to keep the income statement looking good, focusing on 3 or 4 key priorities and shifting the organization from that perspective, and making sure you're making the right technology decisions that align to your strategy.
The one sense that I do get, just chatting to business leaders and industry insiders through the last 12 months or so, is that there's a lot more appetite at board level to support digital transformations. Those projects that were potentially put on the back burner prior to COVID are now, CEOs and boards are looking at these and saying, right, it's time to press go. But do you see a differentiation, though, when it comes to balancing all these demands from a strategic perspective based on maybe the size or the age or the maturity of the industry in which you're operating in? Or is that pretty much a rule of thumb that operates across all of those?
Yeah, certainly my experience, if I look back over the last sort of 5 years in the space, the digital agenda was always at the C-suite. It was always part of executive conversations, board conversations, and philosophically, adoption of digital was always known and accepted. The biggest challenge that I find, particularly in the financial services sector, is that where your majority of your income came was from non-digital channels. It was your branch networks, your call centers, and that typically demanded a large sort of allocation of funding to those channels because that's where your revenue came from. And I think that became one of the blockers and barriers to adoption of digital at the scale that we've seen now. What happened 2 years ago is all of a sudden you couldn't use those infrastructure environments. So you had to go digital. You had to look at things like, how do I sign documentations online? I can't have someone walk into a branch and sign a document. I can't get them to collect a credit card, as an example. So that forced that acceleration. And now I think you've got to a point now where customers are now expecting you to have a digital presence. Before it wasn't an expectation, but now it's absolutely expected. So the board and executive team always knew this was the right thing to do. They just need the catalyst to get going. And I think that's what's really given them momentum. I think the challenge now is to make that sustainable, make sure that that's efficient, and ensure that they don't lose the momentum that has been gained over the last 2 years.
Yeah, momentum is absolutely critical in the conversation. Now, we ran a poll on business tech before this conversation. We asked our audience, what's the greatest opportunity for financial institutions over the next 3 years? And it was a close run thing, but out in front, we've got low cost products. 31% of the audience voted that that's the big opportunity. But then it's fairly close between blockchain and cryptocurrency, 26%, customer experience excellence, 24%, and then offering non-traditional products and services, 19%. So it looks like the audience is quite split on where the opportunity set lies. Let's start with the threats firstly. What do you see as the threats facing financial services organizations in this environment?
Yeah, so I think there's a few. I think there's I think a lot of is spoken about threats being sort of new incumbents, new fintechs, et cetera, et cetera. I think realistically, for a new entrant into the market or fintech to really take on a real incumbent that's been for a long period of time, it's a stretch for me. I don't see them really competing in that space. And I think what we've seen is the big banks, big insurers have kind of seen themselves through that journey. I don't think they should ignore the fintechs and startups, and I think they should embrace what that's bringing to the market. But I think that's not the key issue. For me, the key issue is probably 3 things. I'd say that regulatory compliance, security is, to be a financial institution, you have to be a trusted institution. And without that, if you have a breach on your security around a data leak or something like that, you're really going to struggle as an entity. And as we see, the threats of cybersecurity is becoming a big issue. So compliance, security, absolutely is paramount to being a financial institution. The second thing for me is that organizations have to transform. But if you take an organization like a big bank who's been around for 20, 30 years, their legacy platforms, their legacy capabilities, and even their legacy thinking is holding them back from truly adopting change. And I think that is the shift that a lot of organizations do. And as I said, it's not just the people, it's not just the technology, but it's the people and process that support it. So I think that would be a second component. And the third thing for me is, and this is really, really probably one of the most important things, the war on talent in this country is becoming a massive challenge. to find individuals who have the experience and capabilities to be able to do these transformational changes at scale with the experience and even the technical resources and business resources, we're going to struggle. I think, again, with every negative aspect of COVID, there's also been a positive. We are now seeing, even in our industry, and we know this is an industry problem, is that individuals can now work anywhere around the world, sitting from their laptop at home in South Africa. So now we're not just losing our good team members to other competitors, but we're losing them to global competitors as well. So to me, there's many, but those would be the three key things: security and compliance, the fact that they're going to modernize their businesses, and then obviously war on talent is going to be a big challenge.
Wow. And, for me, running through that is this whole idea of data literacy. And at what stage your organization is in terms of the data literacy spectrum. Are you highly proficient? Maybe companies should be auditing that. And then looking at the war on talent. I was on LinkedIn the other day, just in the data and analytics space, 6,700 job postings. And this is in an economy where we always talk about an unemployment crisis. It's more a skills crisis that we have. There's that demand. We're just not producing the skills. And those who do have the skills, as you say, can pick from almost anywhere in the world. So lots that needs to be done. Where do you see the opportunities on the flip side of that for financial services?
So the two elements. I think data. Let's start there from a data perspective. There's a lot of buzzwords out there in our industry, and they talk about data as an asset. I think for me, we spoke about cloud analytics and capabilities. Absolutely, there's an opportunity to mine data. We do a lot of interesting work with customers around saying, where's the next big frontier and opportunity for big institutions? And often it's actually just understanding their customers and providing the right products and services to their customers. And some of them are known and some of them are unknown. But we've seen some fascinating results around just looking at customer data and really identifying new opportunities. So I think massively big opportunity, and I think data will be one of the key drivers over the next 5 years. But with that, you need the right skills and capabilities. So to me, I think on the talent side of things, Michael, if I'm honest, it's a massive problem. What we don't see in South Africa is we don't see anyone really investing heavily in the grassroots development of talent. We've just gone through as EY a process of doing our grad recruitment. We've done that every year. Being an audit company, it's typically we recruit CAs to become part of our audit practice. But we've just seen that the demand for good technical resources out there, that we've more than our intake of technical graduates into our programs. Even if we don't have forecasted work, we know that work will come because there's just such a big demand for the skills out there. So I think, we've got to focus on the grassroots development, getting the right team members in and really start to give them the right opportunities, even if they move on to other things in their career. And the second thing is we have to focus very heavily on what training programs and certification programs we put in place to skill and also to allow people to cross skill into new ventures as technology evolves over time.
Absolutely. Chatting to Peter de Villiers of Clickertel, he's also really passionate about this idea of tech skills, and he's working with Simedisa and Texit. There's this huge opportunity. If we just look at the war in Ukraine at the moment, in BPO, for example, I think Ukraine earned something like $8 billion from its BPO sector. That is a potential opportunity for South Africa to exploit, but we got to have the right skills. There's a lot to focus on. And you said you shouldn't be biting off too much earlier on. So what are the three key focus areas that you think should really be front and center over the next 3 years?
Yeah, so I think, again, it depends. So just talking generically, for me, the key thing is you've got to protect your base. You've got to make sure that you understand what's going to keep your lights on and keep the business running, and that's important. And in that space in itself, there's lots of threats and challenges and opportunities. Just to list some of those, and there's many. We spoke about compliance, security, all that's absolutely paramount. There's also massive opportunity to improve efficiencies. Things like RPA or automation has been a buzzword for the last 10 years, but I still believe there's massive opportunity to become more efficient around the mundane tasks within an organization. So you've got to focus on paying the bills as a key thing. Focus on 3 or 4 key priorities is absolutely paramount, and don't do more than that. Get organizations behind those. That requires leadership will and investment, and making sure that you focus your limited resources. One of the biggest challenges we see in our clients is there's so much to be done, but there's only so much supply. So you've got to pick those things and back them. Pick those very carefully, make sure there's business drivers behind that, and then resource accordingly. So that would be sort of the second key thing for me. And then, I do believe that there are opportunities to widen and deepen your share of wallet by doing small little shifts in your environment that unlock value. An example here is that how do you look at adding one more product to every one of your customer basket? And often that requires a small shift in your thinking, small shift in your technology that allows you to unlock that value. But sometimes we focus too much on the big shifts and changes would take 2 to 5 years to implement when we miss the opportunity for those small changes.
I think that's some really excellent insight there, because we do often almost get frozen by the big picture. And I think difficult for organizations when you're talking about these transformations to manage the change aspect. And I know they say that culture eats strategy for breakfast, or Peter Drucker says it, but it's so true. And how do you get your employees excited about this change, about this digital journey, understanding the power of data? I think it's an existential question. If you're not, as an organization, thinking about data and looking at who are the big listed companies, who are the winners in today's world, they are those tech companies who understand data. You look at Amazon, you look at Apple, they know how to use it, and they don't use it to spy on us. I know everyone talks about the privacy issue, but it's about offering tailored services and tailored products at the right time, at the right kind of customer journey moment. And if you're not thinking about that, I think you really are under threat. Now, we've discussed a lot of the theory based on all of this deep customer research that you've done over all of your engagements locally and globally. That's the beauty of your reach. And we've reviewed the poll question results from Business Tech. Can we just talk about what you see actually happening on the ground today? Because to my earlier point, we talk about this. Are companies actually going out and executing? What are your views on those getting it right and the opportunities that financial institutions should be taking, given what we've just discussed?
Yeah. So I mean, I also took the poll, and to be honest with you, it took me a while to figure out what my answer would be, because I think each one of them has a relevance. And I think when I took back and I saw the results, I said, why does everyone believe that low cost products is the answer, or a large majority? And my view on that is that because that's where we are in our ecosystem and in our current cycle. Now, obviously, typically the people responding to those are more retail focused, and that would be sort of a bias in the retail space. But if you look at what customers are asking for in the space, they're saying, we want a reliable, safe product at a low cost. And that's what the audience is asking for on an ongoing basis. That came through as a product. Now, the interesting challenge that a lot of institutions are going to have is that they have a long history of providing service and generating income and funds from a client base, for example, in transactional banking. So for their ability to shift to a no-cost or low-cost environment is incredibly difficult, because they've got to basically in themselves and cannibalize their own revenue streams. I think that's a big challenge, and that's why you're not seeing this aggressive shift in that space. And also why strategically a lot of the big institutions are looking for alternative revenue streams to compensate for the revenue they're going to lose in the traditional kind of products that they have. So to me, that's one of the biggest challenges that these bigger institutions have to look at, is saying, how bold a step can I make to reinvent myself, to make myself more relevant, and to answer the request around low-cost products. And the likes of cryptocurrency and blockchain are fantastic technologies, and I think they'll find their place and they'll integrate themselves into a formal ecosystem around financial services. But I think this is the challenge that organizations have, is that there's just so many things to do. You've got to back one of these things aggressively and do them incredibly well. So, Michael, that would be my view on it. It's unfortunately not a simple answer. Maybe the last insight from our side is that you can't be known for everything. If you look at the successes of the big brands over the last a number of years, they've chosen one specific thing and they've become really, really good at that. Whether it is being the innovative institution, whether it's being the low-cost institution, they've chosen something well and they've invested in it and they've staged that mantra for a period of time. But it's not just the marketing messaging that actually delivered as part of their service capabilities as well. And that would be my encouragement to any leaders, is pick something that you believe you can be world-class and do it incredibly well and exceed expectations in that space. The rest will follow in time.
It comes back to what you were saying about focus as well. It reminds me of what Jacques Sellers of FNB was talking about at the results recently. Lots of pressure on the banks' non-interest revenue streams at the moment because those fees, those transactional fees, are being whittled away by some of those fintechs and some of those new digital startups. So you really have to think deeply about what is your new value proposition in terms of adding new revenue bows or strings to your bow. Dave, fantastic chatting to you. We could carry on for a good while longer, but we've reached the end of our time. That was Dave Woolnough, EY Africa Advisory Partner, sharing his insights into how companies are utilizing this data revolution, specifically in financial services, to ensure that they are not going to be overwhelmed by the threats and take the opportunities. You've been watching Business Talk on Business Tech.